Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 5:30 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Russ Riesiger.
And I'm Jeanelle Slade. Sad news coming in from overseas today. A 23-year-old Army sergeant from Billings has died.
The Department of Defense says U.S. Army Sergeant Nathaniel Irish died last Sunday in Iraq in a non-combat related incident.
Now, Irish was a decorated soldier who received 6 medals serving our country.
The Army tells Q2 that Irish and his unit were involved in Operation Inherent Resolve, training Iraqi soldiers to fight ISIS overseas. Q2's Mitch Legge standing by now with more on the Billings born and raised soldier. Mitch?
Russ and Jeanelle, difficult news for a Billings family and friends. A graduate of senior high school, Nathaniel Irish joined the Army in January 2015 and most recently was serving at Fort Wainwright in Alaska. Sergeant Irish was a small arms and artillery repair NCO with the 25th Brigade Support Battalion. His job was to make sure all weapons used on the battlefield were in top working order. Among his awards, Irish earned 2 Army Commendation Medals, 2 Army Achievement Medals, the Army Good Conduct Medal, and the National Civil Defense Medal. Irish died in a non-combat related incident at Camp Taji in Iraq. The U.S. Army says his death is still under investigation as fellow service members and his family mourn the loss of someone incredibly close.
Anytime we lose a soldier, whether it's combat, non-combat, whatever the circumstances, it's a huge blow to the unit, to his fellow soldiers, and we know it is the same for the family. You know, I know they're grieving now, and we just want them to know that they have our full condolences and our full support, and we'll do whatever we can to help them through this trying time.
Irish's casket will be brought back to the States at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware tomorrow afternoon. Russ and Jeanelle.
All right, thanks so much, Mitch.
Well, an update for you tonight on an MTN investigation we brought you about the condition of synthetic grass turf fields across our state.
Since our story aired about defective turf installed at Laurel High School, Field Turf, a massive international company which did the work, has swooped in to test the safety of that field.
Here's MTN Chief Investigative Reporter Andrea Lutz with the results.
The report is known as a GMAX test. It measures the shock absorbance of the field. The results are not very bad, especially for a 10-year-old field. But the company, Firefly Sports Lab, was hired by Field Turf, and the report doesn't address the actual condition of the defective fibers at Laurel High School. We brought you this story earlier this month when MTN Investigates informed Laurel High School that their 2009 Duraspine synthetic grass field was made with defective fibers. It's the same field that's at the very heart of dozens of lawsuits across the country that claim the field fell apart, even injuring athletes. Field Turf never disclosed that information to Laurel. Field Turf said in a statement that the field is in good shape, and Laurel's been told they can have it for another 2 to 3 years. But while in town, Field Turf also threw a hefty dollar amount back at administration when the field does go, saying Field Turf can replace it for $450,000. But there was no discussion from the company about why they sold the school a defective field in the first place. Field Turf says Laurel's 8-year warranty has come and gone. So while Laurel has to think now about an expensive replacement, I'm also learning turf industry experts are questioning the GMAX testing process, saying it's an easy test to pass. Again, Field Turf paid for the test, meaning they chose the company to find those results. For MTN Investigates, I'm Andrea Lutz.
And Andrea has a copy of that report in this story on our website at KTVQ.com.
You can head over to the MTN Investigates tab to see more about what the safety test revealed.
Well, arguments heard today in a Helena courtroom will determine if Governor Steve Bullock's emergency order to ban flavored vaping products will go into effect. District Judge Jennifer Lint will decide if she will issue a preliminary injunction that stops the state from enforcing the emergency ban while the legality of the order is decided. Well, today, school administrators described how the growing problem of underage vaping is impacting their students, and a pediatrician testified about the negative health effects. Now, 4 vape shop owners also took the stand to testify how their product has helped tobacco users stop using traditional cigarettes. A doctor for the plaintiffs also testified that vaping is valuable in the battle of combustible tobacco. Now, the state says any hold on Governor Steve Bullock's emergency ban would do harm to the public.
The people of the state of Montana, through the legislature, have empowered their public health authorities to do the right thing, to respond. And this is a textbook case of where a new and emergent outbreak, documented nationwide and present also in Montana, requires emergency rulemaking.
Now, the hearing is expected to continue through the week. No word yet on when the judge will make her decision.
2 men have filed suit against the Montana Council of the Boy Scouts of America for sexual abuse they claim happened decades ago. One of those cases goes back to the early 1970s in Hamilton, the other to the early 1980s in Great Falls. The men say they were abused by their scout leaders. The suits claim the Boy Scouts and the Montana Council were negligent and committed fraud by failing to supervise the scout leaders who allegedly committed the abuse or warning scouts or their parents about potential dangers. Those suits were filed after Montana changed the statute of limitations for adult survivors of child sexual abuse this past spring, opening a window for claims that were barred by the prior statute of limitations.
Well, hundreds of asbestos-related damage claims filed by residents of Libby are at the heart of a case argued today before the Montana Supreme Court. The defendant in these cases is BNSF Railroad for its alleged role in spreading contaminated vermiculite waste throughout Libby. MTN's Mike Dennison was at the hearing and filed this report.
In January, the state's Asbestos Claims Court rejected BNSF attempts to shield the company from liability for claims by 1,200 people in Libby. The claims say action by the railroad helped spread deadly asbestos fibers through town from vermiculite shipped by rail from the former W.R. Grace mine north of town. On Wednesday, BNSF told the Supreme Court that decision should be overturned. In the words of BNSF attorney Dale Schoengert, the railroad did not mine vermiculite, did not mill it, did not load it into rail cars. It only transported the final product as freight. But attorneys for the plaintiffs told the High Court the case is about more than just the railroad transporting processed vermiculite.
Our case is about the casting of toxic asbestos dust into the community of Libby from the rail yard caused by any disturbance of the dust. That could be the wind. It could be the maintenance activities that the EPA describes. It could be the switching of cars in the rail yard.
Sullivan said hundreds of millions of pounds of asbestos in vermiculite was hauled from the mine into the railroad's yard in downtown Libby. BNSF has invoked several defenses, which it says block liability. It says W.R. Grace is the responsible party, or that federal railroad safety law preempts state law, or that BNSF is a common carrier.
If we're going to say common carriers, you are legally bound under both state and federal law to carry what is presented to you. It makes no sense to hold that carrier liable, strictly liable, if something goes wrong.
Montana's Asbestos Claims Court rejected those arguments and, as Sullivan put it, cleared the way for the plaintiffs and the railroad to prove whether the railroad's actions cause harm or not.
This goes to the issue of causation, Your Honor, and that's what the Asbestos Court has appropriately reserved for trial, the issue of causation and the issue of damages.
The 7 justices asked many questions Wednesday and at the close of the hour-long hearing took the case under advisement and will rule later. Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
Now, thanks, Mike. Montana Asbestos Claims Court is overseeing hundreds of cases in state court right now related to asbestos poisoning in Libby from the defunct W.R. Grace vermiculite mine.
Well, earlier this month, Q2 shared the story of a rogue sled dog team apprehended by the Billings Police Department.
Dispatch 398.
398.
Myself and 430 are going to be at the South Billings Boulevard overpass trying to stop a dog sled.
Here, puppies. Come here.
Okay, that's awesome. Officers David Firebaugh and Jeremiah Adams discovered the dogs by happen chance while out patrolling. As you can see, Q2 acquired dash cam video of the dog chase and the full 4-minute video, which you can see at KTVQ.com. It's a lot of stop and go.
Yeah, but that taste of freedom was short-lived, and after spending a night in doggy jail, The dogs and their owner, Jennifer Mignard, were reunited. That is classic.
That is awesome. Well, there's more news from across our state tonight. Kids and adults both excited for Halloween. Though tonight, some important advice on how to make sure it's a safe adventure. Join me for that and more on your MTN Statewide News at 9 on the CW.
But first, still to come on tonight's 5:30 news, Senator Tester raising the volume with media companies over their distribution to Montana. Find out what he says.
And in sports, state championship week on the soccer field normally isn't reduced to indoor practices, but Scott shows us how Laurel and Central are getting creative with the frozen weather.
And coming up in weather, it was a beautiful day, albeit a little bit on the cool side, but we are looking at a new cold front getting ready to drop in just in time for Halloween. We'll tell you what that can mean for your trick-or-treaters coming up in a few minutes.
You're watching MTN News with Jeanelle Slade and Russ Riesinger. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Green. This is the 5:30 news on Q2, Montana's news leader.